I'd like to welcome Mike Silber, who's the director of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, into the studio now. Mike, you're a director of ICANN. Just to give us a brief overview of what ICANN does.
ICANN is a not-for-profit private corporation tasked with coordinating global unique coordinators, so unique numbers, IP addresses that are used to identify computers on the internet, and then the best known, of course, being domain names. That being said, we don't necessarily govern, we coordinate, so there are different parties who are responsible for different aspects of the chain. So for example, country code names like .za or .uk, there's a country code manager who's responsible for that country code, but we coordinate all of those. Similarly, at the top level, at the generic level, when you're looking at com, net, org, those generic names, we also have different registries who then responsible for coordinating the specific name, as well as registrars for selling those. We provide a coordination function to ensure that there's relative equality, some degree of competition, some element of consumer protection around all of those spaces.
Now, Mike, I was really keen to chat to you today because ICANN recently introduced or announced that it was going to allow the registration of new generic top-level domains. Can you just explain what a generic top-level domain is, first of all, and what this means?
Right. Top-level domains are those that fall immediately to the right of the dot. So .com, there's only one dot behind it, as opposed to, for example, .co.za. So .za would be a top-level domain, but that's assigned specifically for a country code. The generic top-level domains are those that are usable by anybody in the world, like .com, .net, .org, and some of the newer ones that have been introduced over time, like .mobi, trying to target mobile internet users, or .cat, which actually has nothing to do with fluffy felines, but is intended for the Catalan language community.
Okay, but we're now going to have a proliferation of these generic top-level domains. We could have .nike or .coke, etc., etc. What are the implications of this?
Duncan, the intent really, this comes through ICANN's relatively unique bottom-up policy development process. Those parts of the organization responsible for the generic names have come up with a policy indicating that they believe there is a need for further competition and growth in the generic top-level domain space. They put that forward. That's been accepted within the organization. ICANN's been working for the last almost 5 years now on the implementation. We believe that we're close enough to implementation to actually launch the program, which means that first quarter next year you'll be able to apply for a name. What we've also done is we've removed some of the restrictions that we applied previously around launches of new sets of names. So now, as you say, we can have brand names as generic top-level domains if that's what brand owners want. We also are hoping that we're going to see some really interesting developments in the geographic namespace. We've had .asia come in on a previous round, but we're hoping to see some interesting developments like .africa. We're also hoping to see some interesting developments around cities, and there's been a big push by a number of European, North American cities. Unfortunately, not that great a push from less developed countries, but we're hoping to see real interest in the geographic space, in the community space, having seen the example that the Catalan language community have shown with the .cat domain, which has been pretty successful. There are a number of language communities that want to emulate that. But in addition, as you said, we're likely to see big brands come through. We're also likely to see people who hope to build a business model around specific generic names like .food, .music, .blog, .whatever.
Now, these generic top-level domains are not going to be cheap, are they?
No, they certainly aren't. Firstly, there's an application fee. It's intended as a cost recovery application fee. And it's pretty steep at $185,000 US.
Right, so not everyone's going to be registering these.
Not everyone's going to be registering those. The second thing is that the operation of a generic top-level domain, because it is a piece of critical internet infrastructure, is not going to be cheap. And if anything, the $185,000 US is actually going to be the tip of the iceberg. Now, it's likely that you would find a registry service provider who would say, this is likely to be popular. I will be willing to provide the services up front in return for a per registration fee. But it's unlikely that you'd be able to get away with a cheap mechanism, just given the amount of negative action that's happening on the internet at the moment, the number of attacks, for example, that the generic top-level domains come under. You need an incredibly robust and sophisticated architecture. Gone are the days where somebody could run a TLD on a computer under their desk, as Mike Silber used to do with ZA. It now is an incredibly sophisticated process, and because of that, the application fee is likely to be just really the tip of the cost iceberg.